Hi, good morning, everybody, and welcome to another edition of our Cronin Challenge to Change. Can you believe we are in the week before Thanksgiving? Thanksgiving, oh my gosh, I'm jumping a month ahead. A week before Halloween. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it is already here. We are in the final week of October, and Halloween is literally a few days away. And then we have Thanksgiving and then the holidays, and it's, oh my goodness, this year has flown by. Although I know many of us can't wait until 2020 is far behind us, but now we're still in October. And as you all know, October is a month that many different ideas, issues are highlighted. I talked a couple weeks ago about all the different awareness organizations that are out there, the not-for-profit organizations, the different awareness topics that we have. And of course, we have the Cyberbullying Awareness Month. We have the Bullying Awareness Month. We have the Domestic Violence Awareness Month, as you know. We also have so many other months, the awareness issues like cancer and breast cancer. And I've had so many different guests on talking about all of that. And today, because I just wanted to really highlight the domestic violence issue, because as you know, with COVID, you may not know, but I've certainly talked about it a lot on our show here at the Cronin Challenge to Change, as well as on the Cronin Law Firm show, that with the stay-home orders and everybody, kind of being in a rut and just out of our normal routines, domestic violence has been on the rise. And not only has domestic violence, but teen suicide and, depression and anxiety and alcoholism. And so many factors play into domestic violence. And whether that, is a physical domestic violence or a sexual assault, and just because you're married doesn't mean you can't have sexual assault. And just because you're in a consensual relationship doesn't mean that you can't have that kind of assaultive behavior or crime. So, October is the month that we put awareness on these various issues. And now today, I'm so pleased and honored to have with me today to share with you some ideas and issues and knowledge and education is Shelby Nardone. She has been with Haven now for several years. She is a proud graduate of Oakland University, and she has dedicated her life to different not-for-profits. And now this one is just her mission in life to shed awareness and to help obviate any more domestic violence in our community. And with that, I'm so excited to bring Shelby on, and she's with us here today. How are you?
Good. How are you? Thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited to be here today.
Well, I'm excited to have you. And now I have to comment, you're having a hat on. And we know what Halloween is do you normally wear hats, or it kind of looks like a witch's hat?
A little bit. I have a wide variety of hats that I like to wear, but I figured this one looked a little bit more festive.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out of your very busy schedule. And Shelby, I know our viewers want to know, are you from Michigan? Can you give us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, for sure. So I am from Michigan, born and raised. I think I will always be a Michigan girl, no matter where I go. I have grown up in Clarkston, Michigan, and I kind of stayed close to home because my family's here, who I love very much. I graduated from Clarkston High School in 2011 and did my undergrad at Oakland University, where I got a double major in psychology and women gender studies.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Oakland University has grown so much. It's such a great university now. I mean, since the time that I came to the Detroit metro area, gosh, years and years and years ago with school, it's a great university. Were you happy with it? Were you excited to go there and kind of stay local? And then now obviously you've planted roots.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I liked the ability to commute to school and be able to work full time. I was school full-time, work full-time, had a babysitting job. So I had a lot of balls juggling up in the air. And my plan is to go back to Wayne State University next fall for my master's. So
That's awesome. What do you want your
local.
master's in? What do you think?
My master's in social work is the plan.
Okay. So what drove you to study what you did while you were in Oakland University?
Yeah, so my journey to where I am, started with twists and turns as most journeys do. This might sound silly, but my favorite movie of all time is The Silence of the Lambs. Clarice Starling was like such a huge character for me growing up. I wanted to be just like her and to be the hero. And to finally see like a woman in that role, that was, really inspiring for me. And so I was like, I'm going to go into criminal justice. I'm going to, go into law enforcement, the FBI. And then, I get to school and I realize like there are better ways to get justice for people, that this system isn't designed to get justice for victims. And I don't want to be a part of that. I want to find another way because there are other ways. And I really started enjoying the classes I was taking in psychology and women gender studies. And I said, that's the direction I want to go in.
You hit on a really hot topic there, Shelby. You're right. I mean, sometimes victims of crime feel as though they're the ones getting accused of doing something wrong. Whether it's the defense attorney or just the process. I know most prosecutors don't, they don't try to do that, but the process sometimes makes a victim feel like they're on trial for their actions. And it's hard. And then they have to relive the crime again. And, that's why so many victims, unfortunately, recant. They don't have the strength to go through it. They don't want to face their, the person who, who did the crime to them before. It's hard. It's very, very hard.
Yeah, absolutely. And the actual criminal justice process can be re-victimizing for survivors of intimate partner violence and sexual assault. They have to see their perpetrator again and again. They have to take time off of work. They've got to find childcare. They're reliving what happened to them. And, their perpetrator and their defense is usually really good at dragging out the case for years and years and years. And sometimes at a certain point, a survivor says, I need to move on with my life.
Right.
I have to find justice and healing in these other ways because this is, devastating for me. They may also lose a lot of community support, family support, support from their friends, going through this process, especially if the person who, the defendant or the person who assaulted them or perpetrated against them is a family member or is a high standing member of the community and has lots of influence and power. And so they may lose a lot of that community support. And what we know is that isolation is one of the biggest risk factors for victimization and perpetration.
Yeah, absolutely, Shelby. And I know that now you're with Haven and you've been there now for 3 years. And we are in National Domestic Violence Awareness Month. This is October. And like I said earlier in your introduction, October has many, many various different awareness issues. But focusing on the domestic violence aspect and Haven and your affiliation with Haven, how did you come to be there and why?
I mean, Haven was kind of always my dream job. Secretly, even in high school, I had a teacher who volunteered at Haven that would talk a lot about the work that she did there. I found her to be a really great support person and somebody I could confide in. Actually, one of my aunts knew the original founder of Haven back in the 70s when they were doing the work before we had places like Haven for survivors. So I knew a lot about Haven in a lot of different ways. And I was a couple months out of school trying to find a job, working retail full time, and a position for their crisis and support line came up. And I just was like, this is it. This is, I've got to take this opportunity. This is what I've been wanting to do. Because I did crisis work when I did my internship, and I applied and interviewed and I got the job, and I went from a part-time crisis and support line specialist to a full-time prevention specialist and the Survivor Speakers Bureau coordinator in that time.
So when you were on the hotline, the crisis prevention, is that had to have just been, I don't know what the word would be, just some oftentimes very tragic instances. You're on the spot. You need to help these people. How did you do that?
Well, we're fortunate to have a lot of great training and support, and we have a great culture of support at Haven. And there were challenging times. You never know what's going to come through the line. You never know what somebody's circumstances are, or what's going on for them. But to have a cohort that's super supportive was really, really helpful. And for me, it was such a gift. Because sometimes I got to be the first person that somebody ever shared their story with. And how much of a privilege and honor that was to bear witness to someone's pain and to walk them through that journey. There's nothing more that I could ask for in that moment. And I think a lot of people think, they hear crisis line, and they get really scared that they have to be in this crisis where they're ready to call 911, but you don't. It's there for people. If something's going on in your relationship, you're like, something's wrong, but I just don't know what. Or, maybe an assault happened years ago and something is bringing it up and you just need to talk through with somebody who gets it. That's what our crisis and support line is for. And you would talk to somebody just like me.
Well, and I just want our viewers to know, and anyone out there needing help, like you said, Shelby, it doesn't have to be this big thing. If they just need someone to talk to in confidence, I want our viewers to know that it's very confidential, that their information or their story won't be told to lots of people. It's very confidential. It's very private. And sometimes you're helping people that can't afford a counselor or a therapist, or they're too afraid to go to their parish or their, congregation or whatever religious affiliation they may be with, or they're locked in. Their spouse or their significant other has so many, monitors on them that they don't feel free enough to go outside of the home to ask for help or seek help. So, I think it's important, Shelby, that our viewers know that Haven is such a great resource for help on many levels. And now, Shelby, is it just for women or can men call too?
Anybody of any gender can call us for help. Our services are available to any survivor of intimate partner violence and sexual assault. And it goes beyond Oakland County. We've helped survivors from out of the county, out of the state, and sometimes, yes, even out of the country. And if you want more information about our services or what they could look like for you, you can reach us at 248-334-1274. Again, our crisis line is 248-334-1274, and we're going to be there for you anytime, day or night.
And I think it's important that our viewers know that this can happen to men too. There's such a stigma, and I think men feel that they can't talk about it, or they're afraid to because it's, it's not the macho thing or whatever, but it does happen. And it's both on the physical side of it and the sexual side of it. So in your experience, can you talk a little bit about, men being victims?
Yeah, absolutely. When we're talking about intimate partner violence or sexual assault, women are disproportionately and overwhelmingly survivors. It's about 95% of victims of intimate partner violence are female, regardless if their partner is male or female. But that doesn't mean that men aren't also survivors of intimate partner violence and sexual assault. What we know is that 1 in 33 men will experience an attempted or completed rape in their lifetime. And I usually use that statistic because that particular study looked at men who are incarcerated and men who are in the military who are at the highest rates of experiencing sexual violence. That we do have men who come to us for help. We've had men stay at our shelter, and men are welcome to our services. And it can be really challenging for men who are survivors to reach out because they're usually silenced. All survivors are usually silenced when they try to reach out for help. But with men, it's, that you're not a real man, what you didn't fight back, you didn't, how could you let this happen to you? And what we know is that it's never the victim's fault if they've experienced a sexual assault or they're a survivor of intimate partner violence.
I do know that there are some statistics out there regarding the physical assault, the domestic violence, relative to the sexual orientation. And I'm going to read some. You might know them off the top of your head, but I'm referring back to some resources in our research. But it does say that 1 in 4 gay men, 1 in 3 bisexual men, and 3 in 10 heterosexual men will experience rape, physical violence, and or stalking by an intimate partner in their lifetime. So those are real numbers. And it says 2 in 5 lesbian women, 3 in 5 bisexual women, and 1 in 3 heterosexual women will experience rape, physical violence, and or stalking by an intimate partner in their lifetime. So, I bring these numbers up because, you know, lately we haven't really been socializing as much because of COVID, but think back to the days when you were at a house party or even a bar and, you know, you see these people there, you know, just put 5 women together or 5 men and you have your statistics right there. I mean, those are huge numbers. And unfortunately, people aren't made aware of this. Shelby, in your experience, you know, what do you find? Would you see a lot of denial or no, that can't happen to this person? Or, you know, in your studies, what have you found?
Well, what we know is that intimate partner violence and sexual assault, they're public health problems, that these are epidemic proportions that we're seeing, and that we lose this epidemic within the pandemic of what's happening. And I always tell folks, you know, if we started having more conversations about these topics the same way we talk about COVID, we would be having a radically different conversation, because there's so much shame, there's so much blame and silence around these issues, that survivors are afraid to talk about it. And there are a lot of myths and misconceptions about intimate partner violence and sexual assault, about who can be a perpetrator or who can be a victim, and what it's supposed to look like and sound like. We have this one narrative that we're told again and again and again. And, you know, survivors, especially at the margins, are less likely to be believed or get support. And so they're often left behind.
You know, with Haven, do you see a larger number of physical violence or sexual violence, or is it pretty well equal since you've been there?
It's pretty well equal. Usually folks who are calling, you know, for example, for shelter are usually survivors of intimate partner violence. But I would say for other services like our advocacy services or our counseling services, it's about 50-50.
You know, it's a tough thing to put definitions on or parameters on psychological assault or abuse, emotional, verbal abuse from one partner to the other. And I know courts don't really measure it. It's a very hard thing, you know, to really grasp. But I know it's real. And I know oftentimes the fallout, the damage on the victim is sometimes a lot worse. Not that physical violence or intimate partner, you know, the sexual assault, that's not that that's good, because it's all horrible. But when you have that emotional, the psychological or the verbal abuse from one partner to another, oftentimes that does so much damage because it's pervasive over time. Nobody sees it. Nobody knows it. It's behind closed doors. But oftentimes that's a precursor to physical violence. Has anyone really called you saying, you know, I just don't know what's wrong, but something's wrong? All that control, all that, you know, the sociopathic mind games, the behavior. What can people come to Haven suffering from that type of abuse?
Yes, absolutely. And what we know is that intimate partner violence is rooted in power and control, and that perpetrators use a whole variety of tactics to gain power and control because they believe they're entitled to that. I can get what I want, when I want, how I want it, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because that is what I'm entitled to. And so they'll use a wide variety of tactics, including that emotional abuse, economic control, isolation, threats, using children children, family, friends, and pets to control their partner. And we use a tool called the Power and Control Wheel to give survivors language to talk about what's going on in their relationship, because they may have never understood or been able to verbalize, he makes me feel like I'm crazy. Okay, well, we have some language that can help you better understand what's going on in your own relationship. And by the time, we see sexual violence or even physical violence, that we know that there's been a long standing pattern of those other tactics of abuse, that it's a long escalation process.
Yeah. Although I have had, Shelby, some clients come to me who had been victims of very similar behavior, and their relationships really were short-lived. I mean, it can start in just a matter of 1 to 2 years.
Yes.
And it can escalate so fast. And so I think education and knowledge are power. And for victims, it's so important to be able to see the warning signs and really to fix their own behavior and their own makeup so that they don't repeat the pattern. I have seen victims get re-victimized and they think that they're finding a completely new partner, someone totally different. On the outside, he might look so different or she might look so different. But then when you peel off all those onion layers, it's really the same personality that they're attracted to. And so it's really a learning and an education and a growth that person who had been victimized needs to go through so that they don't repeat those patterns and recreate their same reality. Does Haven have any support for that?
So we come from an empowerment-based model, right? So we say, as an advocate, I'm the expert in domestic and sexual violence. Survivors are the experts on their lives. We're not here to tell survivors what they should and shouldn't do. We recognize that survivors are able and capable of making good decisions for themselves, including their next relationship. And really, I think as a culture, we figure out and ask questions about Mary and why is Mary in this relationship and why doesn't she leave and why does she keep going back to or getting in these other relationships? But my question is, why do we think John thinks it's okay to abuse their partner? And why do they think that, that behavior is acceptable? And how do we stop them from ever becoming abusive in the first place? And so, our goal in therapy with survivors is to provide them with support, psychoeducation, and resources, and empower them to take control back over their lives and say, yes, I am strong, I am capable, and I can make good decisions for myself. Absolutely. And to heal from the pain.
Absolutely, Shelby. And that's so important so that they do have a better life moving forward.
Yes.
That empowerment is so important. And that's what I was referring to. They need that empowerment because you can't leave. It is so hard for an abused person to extricate themselves from that relationship because they have so much fear surrounding it. And it is hard. They're either living in denial or they're talking themselves out of it, or the children or whatever it is, it is very, very, very hard to extricate. So when people say, well, why would she stay? She's such a smart person. Why would she stay all those years? Shame on her or whatever. Mm-hmm. It just infuriates me because they don't understand how they got there in the first place. And it's a tough thing. And that's why for me, when I have clients that come to me and they're in such a negative state internally, they personalize it, or they're so down on themselves, they're very insecure, they have no self-esteem, and it kind of just is like a snowball effect when they're with somebody who is abusive. And to remove yourself, to teach, to empower takes time and effort, and to know that something is there like Haven to help them, first of all, get stronger, to leave that abusive relationship, but then also find a new pattern for themselves in their lives, and to surround themselves with supportive people. It's so important. Not judgmental, no judgment.
No judgment here. Like we provide a non-judgmental, supportive, and empowering space. And we recognize that leaving is not always an option for survivors and may not even be the safest option for them. So our goal isn't necessarily to get somebody to leave, but to give them that education, like you were talking about, support and resources so they can make the best decision for themselves, whatever that decision is.
It's also interesting, Shelby, because people say, well, you can't change other people, you can only change yourself. And to your point about sometimes people have to stay for whatever reason, whether it's financial or the children or whatever reason, or they just truly love their partner. But it's about, but we all know love is, that's a whole other topic. It's not love when someone's abusing you. But it's interesting because sometimes if a victim changes how he or she reacts to that abuse or won't tolerate it anymore, the abuser responds differently. It's an interesting dynamic, and that's why I'm all about empowering the victim to be strong for him or herself. And because again, we can't control anyone else but ourselves. Mm-hmm. And it's so important to know that and to move forward from that position. That's empowering in and of itself.
Absolutely, right. And that's something, we talk about survivors as boundaries, and that boundaries, we can't use those to control other people, and it's about our behavior and what we're willing to accept, what we're not willing to accept, what we're comfortable with, what we're not comfortable with. But we also recognize that not everybody is going to respect your boundaries, especially in the context of intimate partner violence. You may set a boundary perfectly, reinforce it, stay strong, but that doesn't necessarily guarantee that abuser will, one, respect your boundary, and two, what we find is that if survivors are starting to change their survival tactics, that abusers will change their abuse tactics to regain that power and control. And so for some of our survivors, setting boundaries can be dangerous, actually dangerous for them. Saying no could be dangerous for them and not even an option. And so recognizing that survivors may be doing a lot of things that we on the outside don't really understand, but they're making decisions for their safety and their children's safety that may not always be what they want or what they believe in, especially when it comes to something like boundaries.
Right. No, that's such a great point. And when you talk about intimate partner violence, can you break that down for our viewers so they truly understand what you mean by that?
Yeah, so when I'm talking about intimate partner violence, we're talking about a very specific kind of domestic violence, which is between two partners. So intimate partner violence is a pattern of assaultive, controlling, abusive behaviors and tactics that one person uses to gain and maintain power and control over their partner in an intimate relationship. And so what, folks who are tuning in, the things that you can walk away with, because I know that was really wordy, is that it's rooted in power and control and that it's an ongoing pattern of behavior. It's not just a one and done kind of thing.
Yeah, it's pervasive over time. It's, and oftentimes it manifests in different ways at first, it's like hints of it at first, like you were saying before, maybe isolating or, from friends or family, they, maybe just starts one time. Oh, you don't need to see that person, or we don't have to go to your family for dinner. It's such a long drive or whatever. There's always these little hints, and it's like incremental, usually, like you said, over time. And then it just kind of piles on and piles on. And just for our viewers to get a little bit of an idea of some examples, domestic violence has different components. You can have it by extreme jealousy. It can start showing fear around a partner, isolation from friends and family, frequent canceling of plans last minute, unexplained injuries or explanations that don't quite add up. These are the things that sometimes if you have a friend that's all of a sudden canceling plans with you, or, like a bruise, and you're like, how did you get that? And your friend makes up some excuse. Those are things that from an outsider's perspective, you can be on the lookout for your friend if you suspect any kind of abuse going on. Shelby, do you have friends calling for their friends who are in trouble?
Yes, the crisis line is also available for support people. So, when I worked on the hotline, I would talk to best friends, sisters, moms, dads, brothers, new partners, principals, teachers, law enforcement, who all had somebody in their life that they were like, how do I help this person? Because it's challenging for them too, because usually that survivor has been so isolated that they feel like they're losing a loved one. And so, we give them that support and give them ways that they can better support and empower their loved one, keep the door open for support, resist that isolation that abuser is trying to use on that victim.
Right.
And then how they can get support for themselves, because that can be really challenging for loved ones too.
Yeah, no, it's just such an unfortunate, tragic occurrence, and it's very, very sad that people have to go through that. And so oftentimes, you might not, you as a friend might not even know your friend is going through that. Nobody knows what goes on behind closed doors, and what someone might think on the outside. Oh, they have such a beautiful relationship. Mm-hmm. A lot of times victims hide what they're going through. They hide it because, like you said, it could be, dangerous for them to tell one person, or they're just afraid, or they're living in denial, or they're hoping it's going to change. They believe the stories, that cycle of abuse, and it's a tough time for so many people. Shelby, we're getting some questions, and I'd like to take some time to ask you a couple questions from our viewers.
Absolutely.
One of them is, if what are the local statistics in Michigan with young women in high school and college? I hate that universities suppress the numbers, and as a parent, I feel helpless. Do you see a rise in this among our young people?
Well, I don't. That's a really, really great question. While I don't have local statistics off the top of my head, what I know is that youth, girls between the ages of 16 and 24 nationally experience the highest rates of intimate partner violence, at triple the national average, actually. And so it's, one of our programs, it's what I do is, we go into schools and provide interactive, age-appropriate education about healthy relationship skills and consent from preschool all the way through university. Because if I'm waiting until they're in high school or they're college age to start having conversations about healthy relationships, it's already too late.
Right.
It's already happening. And what we're seeing is a disturbing trend and an uptick in youth of perpetration of dating violence and victimization of dating violence as well.
Do you think that has to do with social media and how all the kids now are just all over the place, and just the just aggressive behavior on social media, the flaunting, the sexual innuendos, the tones? What do you think is the result of?
That's a really great question. I think, we are so inundated with messages about consent and about relationships that aren't necessarily healthy, and that we're not providing youth a space to be able to think critically about those messages or teach them skills about healthy relationships. And so what they're learning is coming from media, whether that's social media or mainstream media, and they're being inundated with these messages without questioning what kind of messages that they're getting. And so when I talk to teens, they're dying to have this conversation. They want to know more about how to have healthy relationships. They want to know more about consent. These are conversations that they're eager to have. And so, I think it's about how are we providing them with those opportunities to learn more healthy messages about consent and about relationships. I think this has been going on for a long time before social media, but I think social media has given, the opportunity for youth to, I guess, be inundated with those unhealthy messages at a much higher rate.
Well, there's more of a platform for it. There's more of it's not people. They just, I don't know. It's just it's proliferation. It's unfortunate. And now as a parent of young people, how can we teach our kids? How can we arm ourselves with the right tools to help our children have those right tools?
That's a great question. I love that question. We have lots of resources at our website. If you go to www.haven-oakland.org, you can find some resources. There are also great resources for parents on a website called www.loveisrespect.org that we really like, that talks to parents about how they can have conversations with their kids about healthy relationships and consent. And it starts with modeling that behavior as well. So being able to teach your children how to establish boundaries and respect other people's boundaries, respecting their boundaries, right? If they set a boundary with you. All of these things are great places to start for parents. So start doing your research and arming yourself with some tools and information. And, it doesn't have to be a big thing where you have to set time aside to have the talk or anything like that, but just, casual conversations, checking in with them and keeping that door open. And so if there's something that's going wrong, your child feels safe and comfortable enough to tell you about it.
Well, I think that's the key. Absolutely. Communication is so important. We're getting some other questions, Shelby. Hazing seems to be a problem for young boys. How can a parent educate a son, this is kind of along the lines of education, as to staying away from that type of controlling behavior in groups?
That's another really, really great question. And that's something that, a lot of young boys, when we talk to them in college and in high school, they bring up as hazing and those group dynamics. And, our young boys are inundated with messages about what it means to be a man, right? To always be in control, to never show fear or to show any emotion other than anger, that they always have to be on top or they're not a real man. And so I think, affirming identity for young men and boys is really important, that it's okay to, not always be in control or have the answer, that it's okay to reach out for help, that it doesn't make you less of a man, it doesn't make you weak, and that your feelings are just as important, as anybody else's feelings and emotions, that they don't have to go out and prove their manhood again and again and again, and providing them with other young men and boys as support systems. We have a young men's mentorship program that we run at Haven and a young men's leadership that we run at Haven as well, to give young men and boys the space to talk about those issues.
How would someone, in fact, that's a question, how can someone sign up for some of these programs? And are you offering them now with COVID? Are they Zoom? Are they online? Because I'm getting more questions in about how can people attend some of the programs that you offer.
That's great questions. I love all of these questions. So right now, we would usually run those kinds of programs in school systems, but given COVID, that's not something we're able to do. And we are being very intentional and careful about what digital programs that we're offering, because this adds a whole new level of safety concerns for folks. We don't know who is in the space with them while we're having this conversation. And we also don't want to dig up feelings and then somebody's left home alone in their bedroom without resources and support. So we're becoming really strategic and pivoting to make sure that our programs are still trauma informed and survivor centered, but are still available. Our mentorship program is for the youth of the survivors at our agency, so clients, children can participate in our mentorship program, but we are looking to offer our youth leadership programs. We have one for young women and girls and one for young men and boys. And if you want more information, if you go to our website, www.haven-oakland.org, you can look on our prevention education website, our prevention education page, I should say, to learn more about those programs, how you can reach out and sign your children up.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that. And I can imagine having online classes, would be difficult too with the confidentiality aspect. And so that could be a challenge. And so, hopefully that, Haven can get out and help so many more people. And, hopefully with COVID that you are pivoting quickly and everybody can get the help that they need. I have some questions too about if someone calls you, or if you just want to tell our viewers if they need right now some good, solid advice, what baby steps can they take if they are needing to leave and they feel like that's the best course for them? What baby steps can they take to prepare themselves to leave that abusive relationship?
For sure. If you're at a place where you're thinking about leaving, or you want to plan to leave, or you've already made up your mind, start doing the things that are safe for you to make that possible. So what I mean by that is keep a go bag of important documents. If you are able to have access to credit cards or debit cards or your own bank account, that's if you have access to that. Make sure you have your kids' clothes packed, that you have personal things that you don't want to leave behind, medication hidden somewhere, that if you needed to leave suddenly for whatever reason, that you can just take that go bag, grab your kids, and head out the door. That you can start by reaching out to our crisis line. It's just one phone call, 248-334-1274, to speak with an advocate to create a plan, that works for you for leaving, that we have a residential shelter available for survivors who are in immediate danger from their partner, that there are resources and options, and see if there are other options. Can you stay at a friend's or family's house? Can you rent a hotel for a few nights if you needed to? But start coming up with that plan ahead of time. And your situation better than I or anybody else could. But these are just some tips, and covering your tracks. So turning off your location services, making sure that if you're going to post something on social media, that recognizing we can't guarantee who's going to share it or see it. So being mindful of those things as well as you're planning to leave.
Shelby, you're amazing. I mean, I'm just listening to you. You are so well informed and such a great speaker. What has been your why? I know that people have callings in life and we want to serve, and I think it's such an amazing gift that you've been given, and you're helping and touching so many lives. And you're very, very just great at what you're doing. And I just want more and more people who need this help to come find you. And tell us a little bit about, your whys and why you want to serve people.
Thank you for that question. I feel like this has always been my calling, to help people. I've grown up and I've watched so many women that I love and care about go through something like this, and often suffer in silence, be shamed and blamed for what happened to them. That I kept seeing it happen to my friends as I got older. And I was frustrated with how the system failed to respond to them the way they needed to, that so many people were going without justice or without support or resources. And during my internship, I didn't really have the skills to help the people that I wanted to help in that way, because there just wasn't nobody was talking about it. And I realized, I said, it doesn't have to be like this. And getting calls from survivors who were calling because they were frustrated with people's responses and were feeling like helpless and hopeless, that nobody cares or understands. I realized that the way to end this violence is to stop it before it ever starts. Mm-hmm. That I didn't have, conversations, or I wasn't taught how to have a healthy relationship. I wasn't taught about consent. And I wanted to know about those things. And so that led me to prevention, because our goal ultimately is to change the culture which allows for this violence to be so pervasive in the first place, and to give young people who are our future the tools and skills to make that social change, to hold perpetrators accountable, to support and believe survivors, and ultimately how to have healthy relationships that are built in equity and respect for each other. And it's so incredible to see how activated youth are by this, how much they care about this issue, and to see how that they will, that they're going to make this change, that we have young leaders in our community who are already doing it. And that's what keeps me going in this work with them.
That's amazing, Shelby. Now, talking about our youth and talking about educating people to realize what a good relationship is based on, the principles, the communication, the values. Isn't it tough, though, to impress this upon our youth when it really should start in the home? How do we teach our youth now, especially with COVID? They're not in schools, really. how can we educate our youth on a larger scale? That's my one question to you. How can we implement this change?
Oh, that's $1 million question. If I could have any wishes in the world, it would be this education that's ongoing throughout their entire developmental process, and that gets built on and built on, just the way that we teach math. You got to start with addition and subtraction before you can get to multiplication and division, and so on and so on. And so it starts really when they're so young, modeling that healthy behavior and modeling boundaries and consent with your children. And that, I think, again, it goes back to this larger cultural messaging that youth are getting about relationships, and how do we start to create media that represents relationships in a much healthier way, that gives better messages about ethical and affirmative consent, and so that we start to even out and flip the script, so to speak, of all of these messages that we're getting about relationships and consent. One of the examples that I give is the movie Superbad, for example, where the entire premise of that movie is based off of going and drinking a lot of alcohol and having a lot of sex, right? So like, how could we flip the script and flip the messaging so that we have films about relationships, media about relationships and sex and intimacy that's rooted in equity and affirmative consent, rather than these unhealthy messages? And I think, it's all about saturation. Mm-hmm. And getting those healthy messages from different places, from home, from media, from school, from peers. We do a lot of peer education. So youth are educating other youth and holding each other accountable, because they can switch the culture themselves amongst their peers. So it's not a one size fits all is what I'm trying to say, but that it's a lot of these different factors that play into creating social change.
Yeah, and I do believe that at some point our legislation has to change, and that, as you said before, Shelby, is in and of itself a huge challenge. And then, do you think people who have committed such crimes can really effectively change? There's so many questions and there's so many layers, and I don't know, in your experience, at Haven, if you've seen, let's just say, an abuser having abused, but there is real love there. Have they changed? Have you seen any reform, personal reform?
Personally, myself, I have not, simply because the roles in which I have worked in this field, I don't really have the opportunity to see that side of things, right? But what I also want to say is that, abusers can change, because abuse is a learned behavior and it can be unlearned. But the question is, are they willing to change? Do they want to change? And have we as a community and as a culture held them accountable so that they want to change, that they do not get social benefits from acting and behaving this way? In fact, they lose social benefits and power for acting and behaving in this way. That we have to, as a culture, create a space where it's easier for them to change, that they want to change, which means we have to hold them accountable for their choices and behaviors.
Well, it's like what we were talking about before. For a victim to change and get stronger and empowered, he or she has to do a lot of work on him or herself. It's not easy. It's not easy to let go of all that fear and anxiety and oppression and suppression. I mean, years. And so for the abuser to change, I mean, I can imagine it takes a lot of work, a lot of discipline, and the willingness to be coachable. And usually those kinds of personalities, aren't willing to be coachable because they think they know everything. I mean, typically speaking, when you look at the, if we're going to be stereotyping anything, it's, not to be a stereotyper, but it is hard. Change is tough.
Yes, and, it is.
They say it does. It takes the willingness and to be coachable, and sometimes a very, very traumatic event to get someone to have to want to change. But, Shelby, you're a wealth of knowledge, and I want our viewers to know again where they can go when they need this help. Please let them know again the number and the website that they can go find you, and also the where you teach and where you can be heard, because your voice, you have so much to say.
Thank you. So please, if you are, I need some support, I need resources, maybe I know a family member or a loved one who might need this support, you can always offer them our 24/7 crisis and support line, and that is at 248-334-1274. Again, that's 248-334-1274, or visit our website at www.haven-oakland.org, where it lists all of the services that we offer. We are more than just a shelter. We offer a wide variety of services to survivors and their family and friends who are supporting them. So please don't hesitate to call. Call when you're safe, when you have some time and privacy for yourself, if that's possible, or you can utilize our online chat system that you can find at our website. But we're here to support you.
Shelby, and just for some of our viewers right now, what can you tell them to leave them with in terms of whether it's mental abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse? If someone really needs just something to take away from our session with, what can you tell them?
Well, the first thing I want to say is that I believe you, that you deserve to be believed, that your pain, your feelings, your mixed emotions, that they're valid, that it's not your fault. You did not ask for this to happen to you. You did not seek out that abuse. Nobody wants to be abused, right? It's not your fault that this happened to you. And then the third thing is that we're here to help you in any way that you need. That help looks different for everybody. And so we're here to support you wherever you're at in your journey. All you have to do is make the call.
That's amazing, Shelby. You're such an empath and such a sympathetic, intelligent, well-spoken woman. And I want more people to avail themselves of the services that you provide and the level of care that it's obvious that you feel and show. And I'm so grateful that you've been on the show today. Thank you so much. Everybody has challenges in life. And I know with, COVID, we've seen more of our fair share. And like you said before, we've kind of lost this epidemic within this pandemic. And I want people to be aware. I want people to know that it's still alive and still so very real. In fact, more so because people are home, they're stuck, they don't have the resources, they can't leave. They're just, it's more of it on so many levels. And so thank you so much for being here. And I know, you had said one of the callings, you just wanted to be that hero inside the Silence of the Lambs. And you are, and to so many people, you are that hero. So Shelby, thank you so much for being here. And I'm very grateful that you've been with us for this past hour. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, you too. Thanks for having me and having this really important conversations with your viewers.
Thank you so much. We'll be in touch very soon.
Take care. Bye-bye.
And so with that, my friends, oh my goodness, Shelby Nardone, just an amazing wealth of knowledge. And we all have, had some trauma in our lives. We've been through the ringer on a number of issues, whether, who knows, everybody has their own crosses to bear in life. But if you are suffering on any level of any kind of abuse, please reach out to Shelby. She will help you. And if you need any legal action taken, please reach out to me and my firm. We are here to help you at 248-258-3500. I am passionate about helping victims of crime, victims on any level. And we are there to help you 24/7. So please reach out. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being a part of the Cronin Law Firm and being a part of our Challenge to Change. This is such a unique time, and we are all in it together. And this is my request to you. Please challenge yourselves to be the change that you want to see in the world. And if you do need help, please call me. Thank you so much for being here. Please keep your spirits high, and I'm always available 24/7. Stay well and stay informed. And again, till next time, bye-bye.